The first thing you need to know about my wife Taryn is that she's never been late for anything in her life, except when she's lying to me. I'm Nolan Briggs, 40 years old, high school chemistry teacher, and apparently the last person in our mid-sized Indiana town to figure out that my marriage has been running on fumes for the better part of 2 years. The second thing you need to know is that I have an excellent memory for patterns, occupational hazard of teaching teenagers who think they're smarter than they are. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Having dinner with the girls again tonight, Taryn announced this morning, not looking up from her phone as she stirred sugar into her coffee. Same routine, same dismissive tone, same careful avoidance of eye contact that had become her signature move. Which girls? I asked, genuinely curious. In 15 years of marriage, I'd met most of her friends. The real ones, anyway. You know, Jenna and Corey, from high school. She finally glanced up, and I caught something flickering across her face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance that I dared to ask a follow-up question. Jenna Morrison? The one who moved to Phoenix 3 years ago? She's visiting. Quick answer. Too quick. Taryn grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Don't wait up. You know how we get when we start reminiscing. The door slammed before I could point out that Jenna Morrison had blocked Taryn on Facebook after some drama I'd never gotten the full story about. I stood in my kitchen holding a mug that read, "World's Most Adequate Teacher," a gift from my AP chemistry students last Christmas, and felt something click into place. Not anger, exactly. More like the satisfaction you get when you finally identify the unknown variable in an equation. At school, I found Coach Baines in the faculty lounge, grading what appeared to be the world's most optimistic pop quiz on volleyball rules. "Danny," I said, settling into the chair across from him, "you ever notice how Taryn's been having a lot of these girls' nights lately?" Danny Baines has been my closest friend since we both started teaching at Jefferson High 8 years ago. He's the kind of guy who notices everything but only speaks up when it matters. Right now, he was giving me a look I didn't particularly like. "Nolan," he said carefully, "how long has this been going on?" "The dinners? Maybe 6 months. Always the same night of the week. Always with the same mysterious high school friends who apparently have nothing better to do than drive 2 hours to eat overpriced pasta with my wife." Danny set down his red pen. "And you haven't..." "Haven't what? Followed her? Hired a private investigator? Come on, Danny. I teach high school chemistry. I'm not exactly swimming in disposable income for spy work." But even as I said it, I was thinking about Taryn's recent behavior. The way she'd started dressing up for these dinners, the new perfume, the careful way she'd been managing her phone, never leaving it face up anymore. "You could just ask her directly," Danny suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "I did. This morning. Apparently Jenna Morrison is visiting from Phoenix." "Jenna Morrison who hates Taryn's guts?" "That's the one." Danny whistled low. "Brother, I think you need to take a closer look at this situation. The thing about teaching chemistry is that it trains you to observe everything. Small changes in color, temperature, pressure, they all mean something. And I'd been noticing small changes in my wife for months. The way she'd started working late on Thursdays, the new clothes that appeared in her closet, the fact that our joint checking account showed regular charges at Romano's, the trendy Italian place downtown. Always on Thursday nights, always for amounts that suggested more than just Taryn eating alone. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I drove to Romano's. It's the kind of restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the street, designed so people can see and be seen. Perfect for someone who wanted to show off, or perfect for someone like me who wanted to see without being seen. I parked across the street at 6:30 p.m. and waited. At 7:15, Taryn's silver Honda pulled up to the valet stand. She stepped out wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, laughing at something the valet said. She looked beautiful, confident, and completely unlike the woman who'd been giving me one-word answers at home for the past 6 months. At 7:20, a red pickup truck pulled up behind her. Felix Danner climbed out. I knew Felix the way you know any local contractor in a small town, by reputation and the occasional interaction. He'd done some work on our neighbor's deck 2 summers ago. Tall, athletic, with the kind of easy confidence that came from being good-looking and knowing it. The kind of man who wore his success like cologne, just strong enough that everyone noticed. What I didn't know was why he was meeting my wife for dinner. At 7:25, 2 more cars arrived. Jenna Morrison, who was supposed to be in Phoenix, stepped out of a blue sedan. Corey Walsh, another high school classmate I barely remembered, emerged from a white SUV. They all hugged like old friends. They all walked into Romano's together, Taryn's hand briefly touching Felix's arm as he held the door. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching them through the window, watching my wife laugh at Felix's jokes, watching her lean forward when he talked, the way she used to lean forward when I talked, back when we were dating. My phone buzzed with a text from Taryn. Having dinner with school friends, will be late. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, turn around. Through the restaurant window, I watched Taryn check her phone. I watched her face go white. I watched her show the message to the others, watched them all turn toward the window, scanning the street. I started recording with my phone camera, my heart hammering against my ribs, and got out of the car. Walking across that street felt like crossing into enemy territory. Every step brought me closer to confirmation of something I'd been trying not to know for months. But there's a difference between suspecting your wife is lying to you and watching her panic when she realizes she's been caught. Through Romano's windows, I could see the 4 of them huddled around their table like conspirators. Taryn was gesturing frantically. Felix looked annoyed. Jenna and Corey just looked scared. The hostess, a college-aged girl with elaborate nail art, greeted me with professional enthusiasm. Table for 1? Actually, I'm meeting some friends. I see them right over there. I pointed toward Taryn's table and started walking before she could respond. The closer I got, the clearer their conversation became. Just leave. Right now. Before he... That was Corey, always the practical one. He's recording, Jenna hissed. Look at his phone. Felix, to his credit, didn't flinch when I reached their table. He leaned back in his chair and gave me the kind of smile that probably worked on most people. Nolan, what a coincidence. Is it? I kept my phone steady, making sure I got all 4 of them in the frame. Because I'm pretty sure my wife told me she was having dinner with school friends. And here you all are having dinner. So either this is a coincidence, or Taryn's been telling me the truth for once. The silence stretched out like a wire about to snap. Finally, Taryn found her voice. Nolan, please, can we talk about this at home? We could, I said. But then I'd miss the chance to meet your friend Jenna, who's visiting from Phoenix. Except, didn't you move back to Indiana last year, Jenna? Didn't you buy that house on Maple Street, about 15 minutes from our place? Jenna's face went red. Nolan, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like I'm sure Felix can explain why he's been having dinner with my wife every Thursday night for the past 6 months. I turned the camera toward him. What kind of work are you doing for Taryn, Felix? Because I checked, and we haven't hired any contractors lately. Felix's smile finally cracked. Look, man, this isn't what you think. Really? Because what I think is that my wife has been lying to me for months. What I think is that her 2 best friends have been helping her lie to me. And what I think is that you've been screwing my wife in hotels that she's been paying for with our joint checking account. The words came out calmer than I felt. Around us, other diners were starting to stare. The hostess was hovering nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. I reached into my jacket and pulled out 4 manila envelopes, each labeled with a name. Before anyone says anything else, you might want to look at these. Taryn's envelope contained printouts of text messages I'd recovered from our phone bill, detailed, explicit messages between her and Felix, messages that made it very clear what kind of work he'd been doing for her. Jenna's envelope held screenshots of a private Facebook group called Taryn's Thursday Club, where the three women had been sharing details about the affair for months, including photos, including jokes about how clueless I was. Corey's envelope contained copies of hotel receipts, all paid for with credit cards linked to our joint account. The Marriott downtown, the Holiday Inn by the interstate. Even a weekend at the casino resort an hour south, a trip Taryn had told me was a work conference. Felix's envelope was the simplest, copies of Venmo payments from Taryn to him, with memo lines like "Thanks for last night" and "You're amazing." I watched them open the envelopes, watched their faces cycle through shock, fear, and resignation. "The beautiful thing about technology," I said, still recording, "is that it remembers everything, even when we'd rather it didn't." Taryn was crying now, quiet tears that smudged her makeup. "Nolan, please, don't destroy my career over this." "Your career?" I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. "Taryn, you've been stealing money from our joint account to pay for hotel rooms where you could cheat on me. You've been lying to my face every week for months. You created a Facebook group to mock me with your friends, and you're worried about your career?" Felix tried to stand up. "I think we should all calm down and sit down." My voice cut through his like a blade. "You're on camera, Felix. Everything you say right now is being recorded, so choose your words carefully." He sat. I looked around the table at these four people who had been plotting behind my back for months, who had been laughing at me, lying to me, stealing from me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'm going to finish recording this conversation. Then I'm going to go home. And tomorrow, everyone in this town is going to know exactly what kind of people you are." "You can't," Corey started. "I can, and I will." I stopped recording and slipped my phone back into my pocket. "Enjoy your dinner. I hear the lasagna is excellent." I walked out of Romano's with my head high, leaving behind 15 years of marriage and any illusions I'd had about the people I'd trusted most. By the time I got home, I'd already uploaded the video to a private Facebook group that included my family, Taryn's family, our mutual friends, and most of our coworkers. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages. By morning, everyone would know. The war had begun. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word travels fast in a town of 30,000 people, especially when that word involves adultery, public humiliation, and a chemistry teacher who'd just blown up his marriage in the middle of Romano's. The first call I returned was to my principal, Margaret Halverson. Better to get ahead of any workplace drama before it spiraled out of control. "Nolan," she said without preamble, "my phone's been ringing since 6 a.m. Please tell me you didn't do anything illegal." "Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just exposed some lies that needed exposing. The school board is going to ask questions." "Let them ask. I've got documentation for everything I said last night." I was standing in my kitchen, looking out at the driveway where Taryn's car should have been. She hadn't come home. "Margaret, I need you to know that none of this affects my job performance. I'll be in class today, same as always." "I know you will. But Nolan, maybe keep the personal drama out of the faculty lounge for a while." The second call was from my brother Mike in Chicago. "Jesus Christ, Nolan. Mom called me crying. She saw the video." "Good. She always liked Taryn better than me anyway. Now she knows why that was a mistake." "What are you going to do now?" "Whatever I have to." At school, I discovered that teenage students have an even more efficient gossip network than small-town adults. By second period, my AP chemistry class was buzzing with whispered conversations that faded the moment I walked into the room. "Mr. Briggs," asked Sarah Chen, one of my brightest students, "are you okay?" It was the kind of genuine concern that reminded me why I loved teaching. These kids, for all their drama and social media obsessions, still had the capacity for real empathy. I'm fine, Sarah. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes other adults have to deal with the consequences. Now, who can tell me about the relationship between pressure and volume in gas reactions? The lesson continued normally, but I caught several students sneaking glances at their phones. By lunch, I was sure the story had spread to every teenager in town, which meant it had spread to every parent in town, which meant Taryn's professional reputation was about to take a serious hit. I felt surprisingly okay with that. Danny found me in my classroom during my free period. "So," he said, settling into a student desk that was comically small for his 6-foot frame, "I saw the video. And I'm impressed. That was some heartless revenge, brother. I'm not done yet." Danny raised an eyebrow. "What else are you planning?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off or you'll regret it. This is your only warning." I showed Danny the message. He frowned. "Felix?" "Has to be. Taryn's too smart to threaten me directly, and Jenna and Corey are too scared." "What are you going to do?" I smiled. "I'm going to teach him about chemical reactions, specifically the kind that happen when you mix stupidity with consequences." That afternoon, I stopped by the hardware store and bought a few supplies. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal. Just some items that would help illustrate an important scientific principle. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Felix's construction company operated out of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. His red pickup truck was parked in the lot, along with several work vans and a small fleet of equipment. I'd done my research. Felix Danner Contracting was a successful business, built on his reputation for quality work and fair dealing. That reputation was about to take a hit. I waited until after business hours, then made my move. The beauty of small-town life is that everyone knows everyone else's routines. Felix always stopped at Murphy's Tavern after work on Fridays. His truck would be unattended for at least 2 hours. The package I left on his windshield contained copies of all the evidence I'd shown at Romano's, along with a note. "Since you like screwing people over, I thought your wife might be interested in knowing what kind of man she married." But that was just the appetizer. The main course was waiting in his truck cab, 5 pounds of fresh shrimp strategically placed in the air vents and under the seats. In Indiana's humid August heat, it would take about 12 hours for the smell to become truly unbearable. By Monday morning, Felix's truck would be a rolling biohazard. I was walking back to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. "You snake." I turned to find Felix striding across the parking lot, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. Apparently he hadn't stayed at Murphy's as long as usual. "Felix." I kept my voice level, my hands visible. "Out for an evening stroll? You think you're clever, don't you? Humiliating my wife, ruining my business relationships." He stopped about 6 feet away, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. "You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I think I have a pretty good idea. You're a small-town contractor who's been sleeping with married women and thinking he's untouchable." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "But here's the thing about chemistry, Felix. Sometimes when you mix the wrong elements together, you get an explosion. Put the phone away." "No." He took a step closer. I said, "Put it away." And I said, "No. This is a public parking lot, Felix. I have every right to record our conversation." I kept the camera steady on his face. "Especially when you're making threats." "I'm not threatening you." "Really? Because that text message you sent me this afternoon sure sounded like a threat. The one where you told me to back off, or I'd regret it." Felix's face went pale. "I never sent you any text." "Sure you did. From a burner phone, probably. Very smart, except that phone companies keep records of everything." I was bluffing, but he didn't know that. Just like hotels keep records, just like banks keep records, just like Facebook keeps records. "You're insane." "No, Felix. I'm thorough. There's a difference." I stopped recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Enjoy your weekend. And Felix, you might want to get your truck detailed on Monday. I hear the smell of rotting seafood is almost impossible to get out of upholstery. I walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot with his confusion and his rapidly decomposing truck. The war was escalating, and I was winning. Monday morning brought the first real consequences of my weekend activities. I was grading quizzes in my classroom when Principal Halverson knocked on my door. "Nolan, I need to see you in my office." Margaret Halverson had been principal at Jefferson High for 12 years. She was fair, direct, and completely immune to bullshit. If she was calling me to her office, someone had complained. "Felix Danner called the school board this morning," she said once we were seated in her office. "He claims you vandalized his truck. Did he file a police report?" "No." "Did he provide any evidence that I was involved?" "No." "Then I'm not sure why we're having this conversation." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Nolan, I'm not naive. I know you're going through a difficult time, and I know you're angry, but I can't have my teachers engaging in petty revenge schemes." "What revenge schemes? I haven't done anything to Felix Danner except expose his affair with my wife. His truck smells like a fish market." "That's unfortunate. Maybe he should be more careful about where he parks." We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Margaret sighed. "Just be careful, Nolan. Whatever you're planning next, make sure it doesn't come back on the school." "I'm always careful." The truth was, I was just getting started. That afternoon, I had a visitor during my lunch break. Corey Walsh stood in my classroom doorway looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Can we talk?" she asked. "We can talk, but I'm going to record the conversation." "Nolan, please, this has gone far enough." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, this is just the beginning." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, Corey. Tell me what's on your mind." She perched on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. "Taryn is devastated. She's staying with her sister in Indianapolis. She might lose her job." "Good. Good. Nolan, she's your wife." "Was. She was my wife. Now she's just someone who stole money from me to pay for hotel rooms where she could cheat." I leaned forward. "But you knew that already, didn't you? You were part of their little Facebook group. You helped plan their Thursday night adventures." Corey's face crumpled. "We never meant for it to go this far." "What did you think would happen? That I'd just never find out? That I'd keep paying the bills while you all laughed at me behind my back?" It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a screenshot of their Facebook group. Quote, "Poor Nolan has no idea what he's missing at home tonight. Maybe we should send him a postcard from the Marriott." End quote. "That was you, Corey. You posted that." She was crying now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 15 years of marriage. Sorry doesn't give me back the money Taryn stole. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation. What do you want from us?" "I want consequences. Real consequences. I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people you are. We'll leave you alone. All of us. We'll never contact you again." Too late for that. I stood up. "You should go, Corey. And you should tell Jenna and Taryn that this is far from over." She left without another word, and I went back to grading quizzes. But my mind was already working on the next phase of my plan. That evening, I attended the monthly PTA meeting at Jefferson High. I'd never been particularly active in school politics, but I'd decided it was time to get involved in community affairs. The meeting was held in the school cafeteria with about 40 parents scattered across the plastic tables. I recognized most of them. This was a small town after all. But tonight, I was seeing them with new eyes. These were the people who would decide Taryn's social fate. These were the people whose opinions mattered in our community. I didn't have to say anything. Word had already spread, and the whispered conversations that followed me around the room told me everything I needed to know. By the time the meeting started, everyone knew about Taryn's affair. about the Thursday night dinners, about the Facebook group where she and her friends had mocked their husbands. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," said PTA President Linda Morrison, Jenna's mother, "I want to address some recent events that have affected our school community." She looked directly at me. "We all know that personal problems sometimes spill over into public spaces, but I want to remind everyone that our children are watching. They're learning from our example, and the example we set should be one of dignity, forgiveness, and moving forward." It was a nice speech. It was also completely wrong. I stood up. "Mrs. Morrison, I appreciate your concern for our children's welfare, but I think there's an important lesson here that we shouldn't ignore." The room went quiet. 40 pairs of eyes focused on me. Our children need to learn that actions have consequences. They need to understand that lying, cheating, and betraying the people who trust you will eventually catch up with you. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many parents as possible. If we teach them that they can do whatever they want as long as they apologize afterward, we're not preparing them for the real world. "Mr. Briggs," Linda Morrison said carefully, "perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue." "Actually, I think it's the perfect venue, because some of the people involved in this situation have children in this school district, and those children are going to have to live with the consequences of their parents' choices." I sat down. The meeting continued, but I could feel the shift in the room. The whispered conversations were different now, more pointed, more judgmental. By the time I got home, I had 6 text messages from parents expressing their support. 3 more parents had sent friend requests on Facebook. The tide was turning, and it was turning in my favor. 2 weeks after the Romanos incident, I was settling into my new reality. Taryn was still staying with her sister in Indianapolis, communicating only through her lawyer about the divorce proceedings. Felix's construction business had lost 3 major contracts after word spread about his affair with a married woman. Jenna and Corey had been quietly dropped from the social circles they'd worked years to join. I, on the other hand, had become something of a local celebrity. "You're like a folk hero," Danny told me over beers at Murphy's Tavern. "Half the married men in town want to buy you a drink." "And the other half?" "They're terrified their wives are going to expect them to stand up for themselves, too." I laughed, but Danny was right. My public humiliation of Taryn and her accomplices had struck a nerve in our community. I'd received dozens of messages from people sharing their own stories of betrayal, their own experiences with cheating spouses and false friends. It felt good to be the hero for once instead of the fool. But I wasn't done yet. The next phase of my plan required patience and precision. I'd spent the past 2 weeks gathering intelligence, documenting everything, and preparing for the final confrontation. Because while Taryn might be hiding in Indianapolis, and while Felix might be licking his wounds, they hadn't learned their lesson yet. They still thought this was a temporary setback. They still thought they could wait for the gossip to fade down and then resume their lives. They were wrong. I started with the financial angle. 15 years of marriage had given me access to all of Taryn's accounts, all of her passwords, all of her digital footprints. I'd already documented the hotel receipts and the Venmo payments to Felix. But there was more. Much more. Taryn had been skimming money from our joint savings account for over a year. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there. But in the past 6 months, she'd withdrawn nearly $8,000 in cash. Money that should have been going toward our mortgage, our retirement, our future together. Instead, it had been funding her affair. I compiled everything into a comprehensive financial report. Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even receipts for the new clothes she'd been buying for her Thursday night adventures. The total came to just over $15,000. $15,000 of our shared money spent on betraying me. Armed with this documentation, I made an appointment with Janet Reeves, the best divorce lawyer in town. Janet had a reputation for being ruthless in court and absolutely merciless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. "This is impressive work," she said, reviewing my files. "Most people don't think to gather this kind of evidence before they file." "I'm a teacher. I believe in being thorough." "Well, your thoroughness is going to save you a lot of money and heartache. With this kind of documentation, we can push for a very favorable settlement." She looked up from the papers. "What are your goals here, Nolan? Do you want to reconcile, or do you want to end this marriage?" "I want justice. I want consequences. And I want to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person Taryn really is." Janet smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm smile. "Then we're going to get along just fine." The legal paperwork was just the beginning. My real plan was much more ambitious. I'd been thinking about the Facebook group where Taryn, Jenna, and Corey had been mocking me for months. They'd thought it was private, thought it was safe. But social media has a way of making private things public, especially when you know the right people. It turned out that Jenna's teenage daughter, Ashley, was one of my former students. A bright kid who'd always liked me, and who'd been mortified when she learned about her mother's involvement in the affair. When I reached out to her through a carefully worded Facebook message, she was more than willing to help. "Mr. Briggs, I'm so sorry about what my mom did," she wrote back. "She's been acting crazy for months, and now I know why. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." What she could do was provide me with screenshots of every post in that private Facebook group, every cruel joke, every mocking comment, every intimate detail they'd shared about their affairs and their contempt for their husbands. It was a treasure trove of evidence, and it was going to be the centerpiece of my final move. I spent the next week crafting my masterpiece, a comprehensive website documenting the entire affair: bank records, hotel receipts, text messages, Facebook posts, photos from their Thursday night dinners, everything laid out in chronological order, telling the complete story of their betrayal. I called it The Truth About Taryn Briggs and Her Thursday Night Club. The website was professional, factual, and absolutely devastating. I included a disclaimer stating that everything was documented fact, that I had evidence to support every claim, and that anyone who wanted to verify the information was welcome to contact me directly. Then I bought Google Ads targeting our zip code and the surrounding areas. Anyone who searched for Taryn's name, Felix's business, or Jenna and Corey's names would see a link to my website at the top of their results. But the website was just the setup. The real finale required getting them all in the same room one more time. I crafted 4 separate messages, each tailored to its recipient. To Taryn: "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Maybe we can work this out. Meet me at Romano's Thursday night at 7:30. Come alone." To Felix: "Taryn wants to see you. She's meeting me at Romano's Thursday at 7:30 to tell me she's leaving me for you. Be there to support her." To Jenna: "Taryn needs her friends. She's finally telling Nolan the truth Thursday night at Romano's at 7:30. She asked me to make sure you're there." To Corey: "Emergency. Taryn is meeting Nolan Thursday night at Romano's to confess everything. She needs us there for moral support. 7:30 p.m. 4 different stories, 4 different motivations, one inevitable conclusion. They'd all show up expecting something completely different from what they were going to get. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one watching. Thursday night arrived with the kind of humid heat that makes Indiana summers unbearable. I was dressed in my best suit, sitting in my car across from Romano's, watching the parking lot like a hawk watching a field full of mice. This time, I wasn't alone. Danny Baines sat in the passenger seat, operating a second camera. My brother Mike had driven down from Chicago and was positioned at the coffee shop next door with a third angle. Janet Reeves, my lawyer, was at the bar inside Romano's, ready to witness whatever happened next. But the real audience was online. I'd set up a live stream on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, with links shared to every local community group, every parent organization, every professional network I could find. The title was simple: The Final Thursday Night Dinner. By 7:15, over 300 people were watching. "Here comes the first one," Danny said. Taryn's silver Honda pulled up to the valet stand. She stepped out wearing a conservative blue dress, the kind of outfit you'd wear to a reconciliation dinner with your husband. She looked nervous, hopeful, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "She actually thinks you want to work things out," Danny observed. "She always was an optimist." At 7:20, Felix's red pickup truck arrived. He'd finally gotten it professionally cleaned, but I could see him grimacing as he stepped out. The smell might have been gone, but the memory lingered. Felix looked around the parking lot suspiciously before heading inside. He was dressed casually, jeans and a polo shirt, like a man who expected to be claiming his prize. Jenna and Corey arrived together at 7:25, both looking like they were attending a funeral, which, in a way, they were. "All the players are on the board," I said into my phone's microphone, addressing the live stream audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final performance of the Thursday Night Club." Danny and I crossed the street and entered Romano's. The hostess recognized me immediately. After all, I'd provided her workplace with its most memorable customer incident in years. "Table for two," I said. "Somewhere with a good view." She seated us at a table with a perfect sightline to the corner booth, where Taryn, Felix, Jenna, and Corey were having what appeared to be an increasingly heated discussion. I couldn't hear their exact words, but their body language told the story. Taryn was gesturing frantically, clearly confused about why the others were there. Felix looked angry and suspicious. Jenna and Corey just looked scared. "They're figuring it out," Danny said. "Good. Let them stew for a few minutes." I waited until their argument reached its peak, then stood up and walked over to their table. The live stream camera was still running, capturing everything. "Good evening, everyone," I said pleasantly. "Thank you all for coming to our little reunion." 4 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to fury. "What the hell is this?" Felix demanded. "This," I said, "is a reckoning." I pulled out my phone and showed them the live stream. "Say hello to the internet, folks. We currently have 437 people watching, including most of your neighbors, co-workers, and family members." Taryn went white. "Nolan, please, turn it off." "I don't think so. You see, I've spent the past month documenting everything you 4 have done, every lie, every theft, every cruel joke at my expense. And tonight, everyone gets to see the real you." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick folder. "This contains bank records showing that Taryn stole over $15,000 from our joint accounts to fund her affair. It contains screenshots of your private Facebook group, where you spent months mocking me and sharing intimate details about your cheating. It contains hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and text messages that prove this affair has been going on for over a year." "You can't do this," Jenna whispered. "Actually, I can. Everything in this folder is factual and documented. I have evidence for every single claim." I looked directly into the camera. "And now, so does everyone else." Felix tried to stand up. "I'm leaving." "Sit down, Felix. We're not done yet." "You can't make me—" "Actually, I can." I smiled. "Because if you leave now, everyone watching is going to assume you're admitting guilt. And with 400 people watching live, and this video being recorded for posterity, that assumption is going to follow you for the rest of your life." He sat down. "Now then," I continued, "let's talk about consequences. Taryn, you're going to lose half of everything in the divorce, plus you're going to pay me back every penny you stole. Jenna and Corey, your husbands are watching this stream right now, along with most of your friends and co-workers. Felix, your business reputation is finished in this town." "You're destroying our lives," Corey sobbed. "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed your own lives. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." I turned back to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, This is what happens when people think they can lie, cheat, and steal without consequences. This is what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy who just wants to be left alone. Taryn was crying now, her makeup running down her cheeks. Nolan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry everyone knows the truth, but you're not sorry for what you did. I leaned forward. If you were really sorry, you would have stopped after the first time. You would have told me the truth. You would have tried to save our marriage instead of destroying it. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Other diners were openly staring, some holding up their own phones to record. The staff was huddled near the kitchen, unsure whether to intervene. This is harassment, Felix said desperately. No, Felix, this is education. I'm teaching a very important lesson about cause and effect. You caused this situation by sleeping with my wife. The effect is that everyone now knows what kind of man you are. I stood up and addressed the camera one final time. Thank you all for watching tonight's performance. I hope you've learned something valuable about the importance of honesty, loyalty, and treating people with respect. As for these four, I gestured toward the table. Well, they're going to have to live with the consequences of their choices for the rest of their lives. I ended the live stream, pocketed my phone, and walked out of Romano's with Danny beside me. Behind us, I could hear Taryn sobbing, Jenna and Corey arguing, and Felix cursing under his breath. Outside, Mike was waiting by my car with a huge grin. Brother, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's not over yet, I said. The video's going to be online forever. Every time someone searches their names, they're going to find it. Every job interview, every new relationship, every social gathering, this is going to follow them. And you're okay with that? I looked back at Romano's, where 4 people were dealing with the wreckage of their own making. They made their choices, Mike. They thought they were smarter than me, thought they could humiliate me without consequences. They were wrong. I got in my car and drove home to my empty house, which no longer felt empty. It felt clean. It felt honest. It felt like a place where I could start over. The war was over, and I had won completely. The next morning, I woke up to find that my video had been shared over 2,000 times. Local news stations were calling for interviews. My principal called to tell me that 3 school board members had reached out to express their support. Taryn's sister called to tell me that Taryn had been admitted to a psychiatric facility for exhaustion and stress. Felix's wife filed for divorce and took half his business. Jenna and Corey's husbands both filed for separation. Within a week, all 4 of them had left town. I kept teaching chemistry, kept living my life, kept moving forward. But now, I was the man who had stood up for himself, who had refused to be a victim, who had shown an entire community that actions have consequences. Students looked at me with new respect. Parents sought my advice about dealing with difficult situations. Other teachers asked me how I'd found the courage to fight back. The answer was simple. I'd remembered that chemistry is all about reactions. And sometimes, when you mix betrayal with intelligence, when you combine humiliation with determination, when you add public exposure to private shame, you get an explosion that changes everything. They thought they were playing with a harmless chemistry teacher. They learned too late that even the quietest reactions can be the most devastating.